The thunderous crack of an auctioneer's gavel echoes across the crowded hall. Eyes dart towards the back, where a weathered man in faded overalls stands beside a neglected bay horse. The animal's coat lacks luster, its head hangs low, but something in its eyes, a quiet dignity, catches the light. This isn't the gleaming thoroughbred the wealthy buyers came for. Yet one farmer, with calloused hands and barely enough in his worn leather wallet to make the drive home, sees what no one else does. $500, calls the auctioneer, voice tinged with pity. Do I hear $500 for this working animal? Silence blankets the room. The wealthy horse owners shift uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with both the desperate seller, a once celebrated millionaire businessman now facing financial ruin, and the sorry-looking horse that had once been his prized possession. The story I'm about to share isn't just about a horse. It's not seeing value where others see nothing. It's not the extraordinary bond between a man and an animal that changed both their fortunes forever. Our farmer had driven 3 counties over just to attend this prestigious auction, not to buy. He could never afford these animals, but to learn, to dream a little. His small farm was struggling through its 3rd consecutive drought year. His children needed new shoes for school. His wife hadn't complained once, though her eyes carried the weight of their mounting bills. It's something made him raise his hand when no one else would. $300, he called out, voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. The millionaire seller's face twisted with humiliation. This horse, the last of his collection, couldn't even fetch half the asking price. The auctioneer looked relieved. Going once, our farmer knew nothing about the horse's lineage, only that no creature deserved the slaughterhouse when it still had life to give. He'd have to explain this impulse purchase to his wife somehow. Going twice. Then the millionaire stepped forward, eyes locking with the farmer's. That horse was my father's. His voice cracked. He has heart. Just needs someone who believes in him. The gavel fell. Sold to the gentleman in the back. What happened next would rewrite both men's futures. As our farmer led his new purchase through the parking lot, skeptical onlookers whispered and pointed. The horse, seeming to understand it had been given a second chance, lifted its head higher with each step. Neither the farmer nor the former millionaire could have possibly imagined how this unwanted horse would transform their lives, connecting them in ways that transcended money and status. Sometimes the most valuable things are those others have discarded, a truth our farmer was about to discover in the most unexpected way. Because what no one at that auction knew, what the millionaire himself had forgotten, was the secret this horse carried. A secret worth far more than its purchase price. A secret that was about to change everything. The drive home was longer than usual. Every few miles, our farmer would glance in his rearview mirror at the trailer, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. $300 was groceries for a month. It was the electric bill and then some. What would his wife say? Dusk painted the countryside in amber hues as he pulled into his modest farmyard. His oldest boy came running, then stopped short at the side of the trailer. "Dad, you didn't?" The boy's eyes widened. "I did," the farmer replied, patting his son's shoulder. "Sometimes you got to take a chance in this life." His wife appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she approached the trailer. The horse inside nickered softly. "We can barely feed ourselves," she whispered, but there was no anger in her voice, just worry etched into the lines around her eyes. "I know." He took her hand. "But there's something about this one. Trust me." That night, as moonlight spilled across their kitchen table, the farmer shared everything he'd learned at the auction. The horse, named Promise, had belonged to one of the wealthiest horse breeders in the state, a man named Thomas Blackwood. Once featured in business magazines and celebrated at charity galas, Blackwood had lost everything in a series of bad investments. His estate, his cars, and finally his prized horses, all sold to cover mounting debts. But why was this one so unwanted? His wife asked, warming to the story despite herself. The farmer shrugged. Appearances, I suppose, and rumors. Rumors had swirled through the auction house. Whispers that Blackwood had gone mad in his final days of wealth, that he'd hidden away something valuable rather than surrender it to creditors. Some said he'd buried gold on his former property. Others claimed it was documents revealing corporate corruption. Whatever the truth, Promise was the last living connection to the man's former life. The next morning revealed the horse's true condition. Years of neglect had left him undernourished and suspicious of human contact. His coat was dull, his muscles atrophied, but his eyes, alert and intelligent, followed the farmer's every move. "We'll build you back up," the farmer promised, offering an apple from their own tree. Days turned to weeks. The farmer's children named the stars after Promise's white markings. His wife began saving sugar cubes for the horse's morning greeting. Slowly, Promise's coat regained its shine, his step its confidence. Then came the day when the farmer's daughter noticed something odd while brushing Promise's mane, a small, unnatural bump beneath the skin at the base of his neck. The farmer's gentle fingers explored the area, feeling something hard embedded there. That same afternoon, a black sedan with tinted windows drove slowly past their property. The driver, a man in an expensive suit, seemed to study their farmhouse with unusual interest. That evening, as the family sat down to dinner, headlights swept across their windows. A sharp knock followed. The farmer opened the door to find Thomas Blackwood himself on the porch, his once impeccable appearance now weathered by hardship. "I need to see the horse," Blackwood said, his voice tight with urgency. "There's something you should know." Behind him, the same black sedan idled in the driveway, its engine running. "What I didn't tell you at the auction," Blackwood continued, lowering his voice, "is that Promise isn't just a horse. He's the key to everything I lost, and the reason some very dangerous people have been looking for him." The farmer's hand tightened on the doorframe as he realized that in saving one life, he may have put his entire family in danger. The kitchen fell silent as Blackwood sat at their worn oak table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Outside, the black sedan had driven away, but the former millionaire's nervous glances toward the window suggested whoever was in that car wouldn't stay gone for long. "I should start at the beginning," Blackwood said, his voice steadier now. 10 years ago, I wasn't just wealthy, I was powerful. My investment firm handled accounts for people whose names you'd recognize from television. Some of those people," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "they weren't just looking for legitimate returns." The farmer's wife placed a protective hand on her youngest child's shoulder, sending him to bed despite his protests. Some stories weren't meant for small ears. "I discovered evidence of money laundering. Millions flowing through shell companies, politician bribes, offshore accounts. I had everything documented, names, dates, account numbers. But when I threatened to come forward," Blackwood's eyes darkened. "They didn't just take my money. They fabricated evidence, ruined my reputation, made it look like I was the criminal." The farmer leaned forward. "And this evidence? It has something to do with Promise." Blackwood nodded. "Before they seized everything, I encoded the information on a microchip, embedded it under Promise's skin. He was my daughter's favorite. I knew they'd never think to look there." The farmer thought of the bump his daughter had discovered earlier that day. "Those men in the sedan work for someone called Richardson," Blackwood continued. "He was my business partner before he betrayed me. Somehow, he's figured out what I did." Miles away, in a high-rise office building with windows overlooking the city lights, Howard Richardson poured himself a whiskey. Across from him sat a nervous young man in an ill-fitting suit, Blackwood's former stable manager. "You're certain it's the same horse?" Richardson asked, sliding an envelope stuffed with cash across his mahogany desk. "Positive, sir. The markings match. But it's just some farmer who bought him. Nobody important." Richardson's laugh was cold. "That's what makes it dangerous. Nobody important has nothing to lose." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send in the team. I want that farm watched. Nobody approaches that horse without my knowledge." Back at the farmhouse, the farmer's oldest son couldn't sleep. Through his bedroom window, he watched his father and Blackwood walk to the barn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Slipping out of bed, he followed at a distance, curious about this midnight meeting. Inside, the farmer gently ran his hands along Promise's neck, while Blackwood held the flashlight. "Here," the farmer said, feeling the hard lump. "Whatever you put in him, it's caused some inflammation." "It needs to be removed," Blackwood said. "But not here. I have a friend, a veterinarian who can extract it safely and help us use the information. We need to move Promise tonight." From his hiding spot behind hay bales, the boy's eyes widened. Take Promise away? After all the work they'd put into nursing him back to health? The horse belonged with them now. The sound of tires on gravel silenced them all. Headlights swept across the barn's wooden slats as multiple vehicles pulled into the farmyard. "Richardson," Blackwood whispered, face paling. "They found me faster than I thought." The farmer acted quickly, extinguishing the flashlight and moving to Promise's stall. "There's a back trail through the woods," he whispered. "It leads to my neighbor's property. If we can get Promise there." The barn door creaked open. Light from powerful flashlights cut through the darkness. The farmer's son ducked deeper into the shadows, heart pounding. "I know you're in here, Thomas," called a smooth voice. "Let's not make this difficult." The horse, the chip, and we all walk away. Nobody needs to get hurt. Promise shifted nervously in his stall. The farmer's hand on his neck was the only thing keeping him calm. Go, Blackwood whispered to the farmer. Take Promise out the back. I'll distract them. And leave you here? They'll kill you. Blackwood's smile was sad. I've been dead for years. But you have a family, a life. Promise trusts you now, not me. Before the farmer could protest, Blackwood stepped into the light, hands raised. Richardson, he called, let's talk like civilized men. The farmer, staying low, began slowly guiding Promise toward the rear door. His son, seeing his father's plan, slipped out first to hold it open. Their eyes met in silent understanding, a moment of trust between father and son. As they led Promise into the cool night air, a shot rang out from inside the barn. The farmer froze, torn between helping Blackwood and protecting his family. His son's urgent whisper cut through his indecision. Dad, the boy said, pointing to headlights approaching from the direction of their only escape route. There's more of them coming. We're surrounded. Time seemed to freeze as the farmer assessed their desperate situation. Promise shifted nervously beside him, sensing the danger. The boy gripped his father's sleeve, his young face resolute despite the fear in his eyes. The creek tunnel, the boy whispered. Remember? We could lead Promise through there. The farmer nodded quickly. The old drainage tunnel running beneath their property had been a childhood adventure spot for his kids, tight for a horse, but possibly their only chance. As headlights from both directions converged on the barn, they slipped into the shadows of the apple orchard, guiding Promise between the trees. Inside the barn, Blackwood stood facing Richardson, who stepped forward flanked by two men in dark suits. The fallen millionaire's calm demeanor masked the terror he felt for the farmer's family. You always were too clever for your own good, Thomas, Richardson said, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. Did you really think hiding evidence on a horse would keep you safe forever? It kept me alive this long, Blackwood replied. Those documents show everything, Howard. The senators you bribed, the pension funds you emptied, the families who lost everything while you built vacation homes. Richardson's smile never reached his eyes, and yet here you are broke and desperate, while he gestured to his immaculate suit, continue to thrive. Funny how the world works. Where's the horse, Thomas? Richardson's patience was wearing thin. Gone, Blackwood said, satisfaction creeping into his voice. And so is your chance of silencing me. Richardson's face hardened. He nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward menacingly. Meanwhile, at the farmhouse, the farmer's wife had awakened to the commotion. Peering through curtains, she saw the unfamiliar vehicles surrounding their property. With practiced calm, born from years of weathering hardship, she gathered her younger children. We're playing a game, she whispered, leading them to the root cellar. Like hide and seek, but you must stay very quiet until Dad or I come get you. Once they were safely hidden, she grabbed her late father's shotgun from above the fireplace. Country living had taught her to be prepared for trouble, though she'd never imagined anything like this. Through the moonlit orchard, the farmer, his son, and Promise made their way to the creek bank. The tunnel entrance loomed before them, a concrete arch half hidden by overgrowth. The farmer hesitated. Promise was still weak from months of neglect. The tunnel was low, dark, and nearly a quarter-mile long. We don't have a choice, Dad, his son urged, as flashlight beams swept the property behind them. The farmer removed his belt and fashioned a makeshift lead for Promise. Stay close, he instructed his son. If anything happens to me, run to Mrs. Johnson's farm. She'll help you. As they coaxed the nervous horse into the tunnel, Promise balked, eyes wide with fear. The sound of men shouting carried through the night air. You won't go in, the boy said desperately. The farmer ran his hands along Promise's neck, finding the spot where the microchip lay embedded. Everything, their safety, Blackwood's sacrifice, justice itself, hinged on this horse and what he carried. Trust goes both ways, the farmer whispered to Promise. Removing his jacket, he covered the horse's eyes and began humming a low, steady tune, the same melody he used when helping nervous animals during birthing season. Promise's breathing steadied. Step by cautious step, they entered the darkness of the tunnel. Back at the barn, the confrontation between Blackwood and Richardson had escalated. Blood trickled from Blackwood's lip as he slumped against the stall door. For the last time, Richardson snarled, where would they take the horse? A gunshot echoed across the property, not from the barn, but from the direction of the farmhouse. Richardson's attention snapped toward the sound. Sir, one of his men called from outside. Someone's firing at our guys by the house. Richardson's face contorted with rage. What had begun as a simple retrieval was spiraling out of control. "Find them," he ordered. "Every acre of this farm. Now." Inside the tunnel, the farmer, his son, and Promise waded through ankle-deep water. The boy's small flashlight provided their only illumination. The confined space amplified every sound: their breathing, the splash of hooves, the distant shouts. Halfway through, Promise began to struggle, his massive body barely fitting as the tunnel narrowed. The farmer pushed forward. Even as sharp concrete scraped his shoulders. "He can't make it," the boy's voice trembled. "The ceiling's too low here." The farmer made a split-second decision. If they couldn't move forward and couldn't go back— "The chip," he said. "We need to get it out now." The boy's eyes widened. "Here? How?" The farmer pulled out his pocket knife. "Hold the light steady." Above ground, Richardson's men swept the property systematically. At the farmhouse, the farmer's wife had fired a warning shot before retreating inside, barricading the doors. One of Richardson's men discovered fresh hoofprints leading toward the creek. In the tunnel, the farmer's hands shook as he felt along Promise's neck. Finding the lump, he whispered reassurances to the horse while positioning his knife. "Dad, listen," his son interrupted. Voices and footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance behind them. Flashlight beams reflected off the tunnel walls. "Hold him steady," the farmer whispered. As he prepared to make the incision, Promise suddenly reared up, smashing his head against the low ceiling. The impact dislodged years of sediment and concrete. With a thunderous rumble, the ancient tunnel began to collapse. The farmer threw himself over his son as chunks of concrete and earth crashed down around them. Promise whinnied in terror as darkness enveloped them completely. When the dust settled, a wall of debris separated them from their pursuers, but also from their exit. The boy's flashlight, miraculously still working, revealed their desperate situation. They were trapped, with water already rising around their ankles. "Dad," the boy coughed through the dust. "What do we do now?" "The old creek trail," the farmer suddenly remembered, his voice echoing in their concrete prison. "There's a maintenance shaft about 30 yards ahead. It leads up to the north pasture." Hope rekindled, they waded forward through rising water, Promise following with newfound trust. The maintenance shaft appeared as promised, a rusted ladder leading to a heavy metal cover above. The farmer boosted his son up first, who pushed against the cover with all his strength. "It's stuck," the boy grunted. The farmer joined him on the ladder, their combined force finally shifting the decades-old metal. Moonlight spilled into the tunnel as the cover gave way. The boy scrambled out, then helped guide Promise as the farmer pushed from below. With one final effort, the horse leaped to safety, the farmer close behind. They emerged in the far corner of their property, hidden by tall grass. In the distance, flashlights still swept their farmland, but here, momentarily they were invisible beneath the star-filled sky. The farmer wasted no time. Using his knife and guided by moonlight, he located the lump on Promise's neck. The horse stood remarkably still, as if understanding the importance of this moment. When the chip finally came free, a tiny glass capsule no larger than a grain of rice, the farmer felt its weight far beyond its size. This small object held the power to restore justice and save their family. "Take this to Mrs. Johnson's farm," he told his son, pressing the chip into his small hand. "Tell her to call Sheriff Taylor. I'm going back for your mother and siblings." Dawn was breaking as Sheriff Taylor's vehicles surrounded the farmhouse. Richardson and his men found themselves outmanned and outgunned by local law enforcement responding to Mrs. Johnson's call. The evidence on the chip, financial records, emails, recorded conversations, was irrefutable. 1 year later, the farm looked different. New fencing surrounded expanded pastures. A freshly painted barn housed not just Promise, but a small herd of rescue horses. The farmhouse roof no longer leaked, and the children wore new clothes to school. The reward money from the financial crimes investigation had transformed their lives, but the farmer insisted the real wealth came from elsewhere. Every morning, he still woke before sunrise to feed Promise first, the horse that had brought not just financial security, but a deeper understanding of faith and second chances. Blackwood, cleared of all wrongdoing, had used his restored reputation to start a foundation helping families affected by financial fraud. He visited often, teaching the farmer's children about horse breeding and business ethics in equal measure. Richardson watched the news of his sentencing from a prison cell, his empire dismantled, his name now synonymous with corruption rather than success. On warm evenings, the farmer and his wife would sit on their new porch swing, watching Promise run free in the pasture, powerful, healthy, and beautiful. "You know," his wife said, leaning against his shoulder, "most people would say you got lucky at that auction." The farmer shook his head, smiling as he watched the horse that had changed everything. "It wasn't luck," he replied quietly. "When you believe in something everyone else has given up on, that's not luck. That's faith." Promise raised his head at that moment, as if acknowledging his role in their story, before galloping across the field with the strength and grace that had been within him all along, just waiting for someone who could see it.